Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the weekly radio show to uncover and unlock the entrepreneurial skills in your business. Many introverts I've spoken to believe that extroverts are more likely to give unrequested feedback. I've often said that feedback is ego-driven and needs to be treated with care. If you wouldn't approach somebody for advice, why would you listen to feedback that they give you? And if you think that's strong, my guest this week goes further. Her book, No More Feedback, Cultivate Consciousness at Work, disrupts commonly held beliefs to reveal why feedback undermines employee development, the impact feedback has on our three core human capabilities, and the alternative that leads to self-regulating employees. Carol Sanford is an award-winning business educator, summit producer, podcaster, and author. Her books are required business school reading at Stanford and Harvard, and her clients include Fortune 500 companies like Colgate and DuPont. So Carol and I are discussing feedback and how it might be damaging your staff, not helping them. But also, introvert myth of the week, perception is reality. And tip of the week, changing your perception of people can change how your team performs. So just before speaking to Carol, how has your week been? I've loved the sunshine, and suddenly on my daily run along the riverbank there's been beautiful butterflies. It led me to thinking about the bright, vivid colours and patterns on their wings. What else do you do while running anyway? I was told many years ago that these patterns are to scare off things that might harm them. If my story is correct, butterflies developed bright colours to warn off other predators. One of my favourite fish is the John Dory. It's a fish that has the impression of a huge eye on its side. It looks like it's always looking at you. Perhaps that's meant to scare predators too. Now you, of course, have no such delusions. You don't get fooled by brightly coloured insects or fish with big eyes. You realise it's an illusion, a perception. Perception is simply the way you look at something. So what are your perceptions of introversion? Maybe you see introversion as positive, detailed, listening, often less ego-driven, and me. Maybe you're much better than that and you see it as neutral. It's neither good or bad. But many people, introverts and extroverts, have a negative perception of introversion, probably because of biases they've collected over the years. Introversion is only a label. The person is much more than that. There are many positive and aspects to the person. Many won't get seen unless you remove that perception. Your perception is your reality, not somebody else's. It's only your map of the world, which you've created over the years. So if you want to change your perception, which can be hard, try some of these ideas. Number 1, look for ways to notice positive and different points about the person. Express them when you can. And yes, that can be hard, especially when you think about the feedback things we're going to talk about today. Challenge yourself to note things that feel uncomfortable. If your perception is that they never speak up, take note when they do. If you think they're unhappy, look for signs that they're not. Challenge the negative talk inside your head. When you feel a negative reaction, think of the opposite feeling or reaction. You'll need to do this before you react or respond to them. And listen to what others say. What are the signs they see? How is their perception different? Even when both of you have negative perceptions, you'll start to see they have different rationale, some of which you'll disagree with. And each of these steps will start to make you think differently. As you do that, you'll allow yourself to see things differently, react differently, and they'll react to you differently. We all create our own perceptions of introversion. We can all recreate those perceptions. Do let me know what tip you'd like to help you activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business, or what introvert myth you'd like exposed. Drop me an email, give me a call, or add it as a comment to your review on the iTunes store. I would love to hear from you. But now, it's time to talk to Carol. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, John. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. How about yourself?
Very good. Thank you.
Just before we dive into this whole subject of feedback, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
It depends on what I choose.
Oh, I
I
like
bet
that.
you've never had that answer.
What does it mean to you?
Well, for one thing, we are never fixed as human beings. And the question of choosing between says I'm fixed, I have no choice. It's some kind of predefined box I'm in. For me, I need to restore deeply. I do a lot of deep work. I've written 12 books. I need a lot of quiet time. I don't build a lot of my thinking out loud with other people. That's more the normal description of an introvert. But often some people talk about an introvert being shy or unable to relate to people, right? All that kind of stuff.
Oh, no.
And one of those is like a way of working under one condition where when I'm with you, I better not be separated from, like when I'm writing. I need both of those arenas. I need to develop both of them. And I'm not shy if I put myself in mind of what you're trying to do, you, John, your listeners. Then suddenly I don't think about me. I'm not wrapped up in me and what you're thinking of me. I am in and choosing to be in a place of what I call external considering.
Brilliant. Oh, I like that. How does that link across to feedback? Is that where the external considering comes in?
Well, yeah, but we have to back up one step before that.
Okay.
Let me give you a little context. I worked on a doctorate in psychology. I did a very interesting research study, which I put in No More Feedback, Cultivate Consciousness at Work, the book where we got together around. And what I noticed, I had 9-year-old boys, 18 of them, 9 in one group, 9 in another. And we gave feedback to one group on how well they were doing on a task. At the end, they asked them how well they thought they did. And all of these little boys said, perfect, we were great, got it all right. They could explain why. And then the monitor said, should we show you a video of what you did? Because it was a physical set of movements. Everybody could see whether they were right or not. And they said, sure. And when we did, it was all over the map. They hadn't even remotely done what had been asked. And so the monitor said, well, would you like to do it again? Well, they did. They got worse at what they were doing. And she said, do you want to see the new video? They didn't answer.
Good grief.
Then we did the other 9. And instead of giving them feedback, the monitor said, if you were going to do that same exercise again and you wanted to do it better, what would you do? And they thought about it and had ideas. They started popping with, they were a little slow the first round, but then they did some things like count out loud together. The second round, they asked if they wanted to prove it. They got in a circle so they can help each other. We watched these 9-year-old boys blossom from giving them an inner reflection coming from themselves, whereas the first one, where we gave them accurate reflection and feedback, it shut them down and it drove them toward increasing number of lies. That's the foundation. But I then went on to do all my work in how well people can see themselves, and discovered we had a premise put out in the 1920s by a guy named John Watson, the founder of behavioralism, who said humans can't see themselves. They have no internal capability. They have to be like rats in a maze, conditioned from the outside. That was 40 years later disproven when the first MRIs and a whole set of other research came up. But we still have a culture which says that you are a closed system. You can't see yourself. You can't be accurate. You have to have external. That was my work.
Summary of that then is that we have a culture, a business culture, which I don't know, is developed around the construct that giving people feedback is a good thing. And really what you're saying is it doesn't work.
What is wrong with it is it undermines the 3 core human capabilities, one of which is external considering we just talked about. So when you John, say, well, I'd love to give you some feedback on how well you did on this interview, and I sit and listen, I feel like I am not in thinking about you anymore. I'm thinking about me. But if you've got customers and other people in the company, and you don't think about them, you're always thinking about yourself, which feedback undermines our ability to think about others. It shuts down our ability to feel in control and responsible for our own growth and development. And it shuts down our sense of being able to have personal agency. And instead, we have agency in regard to other people and what they want.
So if you were to give me feedback from what you've just said, that would mean I stop taking responsibility for my own actions and I rely on what you're telling me. Is that right?
Over time, the more, if we have parents who are constantly telling us what to do, children develop their following of their ideas and develop none of their own. And we did this with looking at peer pressure. Kids who grew up and were from young saying, how did that affect you? How did you decide to do that? What would you do next time? They get in much less trouble when they're teenagers because they haven't been trained into, quote, peer pressure.
Instead of giving feedback, then ask the question, if you were to do that again, how would you make it better?
That's not enough. Asking questions in a culture that have conditioned. I build organization and families. All my books use everything from families to economic development to corporations. You have to build infrastructure to unlearn all the conditioning you've had in society and open so that people can initiate. With adults, they will answer what they think you want. Or they will get worried because they're afraid they're not going to get it right because there's nobody to tell me. So please don't go out and ask questions. Read the book and it'll show you how to redesign a culture and an infrastructure so people unlearn and start to move toward being able to make the difference we all really want to make. Am I making any sense, John?
So step one is to unlearn the bad habits that we've got so that people can start to rely on their own innate ability to work out what's got to happen in future for the other person.
Yeah, and it's not stepwise. They happen simultaneously. Yeah. You are learning the new and unlearning.
And as we start to wrap up, I always ask my guests for two tips. One's a tip for introverts, considering the feedback subject we've been talking about. And one might be a tip for perhaps a non-introverted manager or leader.
So the first thing is I'd love for you to give up labeling yourself. And I would ask you to either side to say, when do I really need to go into it? Am I taking care of the deep work, the silent time, the restorative experience that psychology really defines as introverted? And am I noticing when I become shy or nervous? It may mean that what I think is introvertedness is really my feeling out of control or not thinking about others, thinking only about myself. So if you're a person like that, the book has exercises and things you can do, and it's dirt cheap.
What's the name of the book?
No More Feedback. And it has exercise that can help you start to understand yourself. And why are you falling into where you feel out of control, internal considering, not external, subject to authority? Managers first can stop assuming they can see that person better than they can see themselves. 97% of people who gave feedback were telling people what they themselves couldn't see about themselves. In other words, they were rejected. So close your mouth. You might start to rethink performance reviews, anything that comes from outside, and start to ask people at the beginning of the year, what is it you really want to contribute this year? What do you need to know when you've achieved that? How will you know when you have? And you'll be able to show me too, although it's not going to be about me. What capability do you need to build to do that? And how can I help?
Love it. So number one, we've talked about feedback and no more feedback, making people think about taking that external position. And number two, you dismiss the labels thing. And I love that because I have a big thing about labels as well. And stop trying to behave like the label says you are and look inside yourself and see what's going on.
Stop thinking of people as a rat in a maze, that you're trying to give them cheese at the end to get there. That's what feedback is. If you can just switch that mindset and think my only job, I say, think of yourself as one of the maids or butlers in the basement. And your job is to not assume you know what goes on upstairs, but go ask, and how can I help? It's kind of a funny metaphor, but it really switches you thinking about what your job is. as a leader or a manager.
Carol, how can people get back in touch with you? And I'm sure some of the listeners will want to talk to you about this.
CarolSanford.com. CarolSanford.com.
That's brilliant talking to you, Carol. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me, John.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear that some people actually believe. This week's myth then, the perception of introverts is reality. Change your perception and the people in your team will start to change too. People shouldn't play down to a label. That really isn't what the label is for. So there's a thought for the week. Thanks for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you enjoyed this week's show. Please add your review to the iTunes store. It will mean a lot. Enjoy being introversial, and I'll catch up with you next week.